On the evening of August 21st, 1955, a family living on the outskirts of Keller Township, Kentucky, suddenly burst into the Hopkinsville Police Department, claiming they had spent hours fighting off small goblin-like silvery creatures with gunfire. This spawned what ufologists regard as one of the most significant and well-documented cases in the history of UFO incidents.
There have been reports of strange creatures in the area.
Witnesses say they couldn't believe what they were seeing.
What is that? Welcome, beloved fofers, doubters, naysayers, non-believers, and skeptics. Welcome to Paranormal Fable or Fact. I am Victor Trevino, joined by my co-host and beautiful wife, Tammy.
We are your humble guides to tales of alleged hoaxes, unbelievable stories, and the overall strange.
Awesome. Okay, just to remind the listeners, we do have an email, and we would love to hear your stories. And if your story is too long to type in an email, you can get an app.
An app on your smartphone.
Yes, a digital recorder.
Yes.
And you can record your story and email it to us that way digitally, so that we can still get your stories. Also, we would love to hear from our fans, to whether we're doing good, whether you like us, you hate us, maybe ideas for future stories. That would be awesome. We have a new mic, which you might have noticed, and in the last episode I could hear like cars and stuff in the background, so I think the gain was set up a little too high, so we lowered it now. Hopefully it sounds better, and hopefully we can't hear so many background noises, but who knows?
Remember, we are not professionals.
No, not professionals. Now we're talking about today, it's called the Goblins. And this is from the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. Just to make some quick mentions before we go over the summary of what happened. At the time, in 1955, the Kelly Township had less than 200 people living in the area. So we're talking about like a one-horse town, baby. I mean, literally.
Probably all kinfolk.
Probably all knew each other from the local church.
Oh, definitely. If there's 200 people, there's probably like 10 churches.
No, maybe. I would think probably just one or two big ones. And everybody just kind of knew each other.
It's the Bible Belt.
Yeah, it's the Bible Belt. The Sutton home, where this all happened, it had electricity, which is pretty good, but it had no running water or a telephone, which is significant, I think, when we go over the encounter.
In the story, yeah.
Yeah. So now we're going to go over the quick summary of what had happened. Basically, they were all playing cards, and we're not going to talk about who was there and everything until we get into the real facts.
Okay, sounds good.
They were all playing cards. A friend of the eldest son went out to get a glass of water from the well, because again, they had no running water. And he came back with this crazy story about seeing some rainbow thing in the sky that passed over the farmhouse. And everybody basically laughed at him, thinking he was pranking.
Yeah.
Even his wife thought he was pranking. So he basically talked Lucky, who was the eldest son,
and his
best friend, yes. He basically talked Lucky into going outside, going back to the well, to show him what he had seen. And they went out there, kind of stood around for a couple minutes, nothing happened. So they started walking back, and they noticed something in the backyard, a glow, a weird glow coming through the trees. And as it got closer, they realized it was between 3 and 4 feet tall, and it was some kind of humanoid with very long arms that were raised above its head, as though it was saying, "I surrender." Don't shoot, I surrender.
Oh, okay.
Kind of motion. But it was floating towards them. They said it wasn't it didn't seem to be touching the ground. So of course they'd freak out and run back in the house. So over the next few hours, these things are scratching on the roof, peeking in the windows. I guess they had the doors open because it was August night and it was hot.
Oh, yeah.
And these things kept coming
Humid.
right up, but they had screen doors.
Yeah.
And these things kept coming right up to the screens, and they were shooting them right through the screens. They had a 20-gauge shotgun and a 22 pistol, and they were standing guard. One of them was at the front door, and one of them was at the back door. But every time somebody would see something in the window, they would basically shoot at it through the window, which is crazy. Point-blank range, and these things they said it sounded like they were hitting like something metal when they shot at these things.
Wow.
And when the things were hovering, they would, I guess most of the time they were actually on the ground, like running around and crawling and stuff. But they said when they were hovering and they shot them, they did like this little weird flip in the air and would just like kind of run off, scamper off into the brush, only to come back a few minutes later.
Wow.
The gunfire had no effect on these things, apparently. Once the things seemed to like kind of back away from the house for a long enough time, the family made a break for the trucks, all piled in, and rushed down to the or to the police department down in Hopkinsville to report what had happened. So I guess, and that's basically the gist of it.
Okay.
So then at that point, the officer on duty called the chief, who is this Chief Russell Greenwell, and the chief contacted the state police, the local sheriff, and for some weird reason, he contacted Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and got MPs to be sent out. And all of them went up there. So there was like 12 or 13 authorities.
Just by hearing the story, just by hearing the incident happened.
Because they described these silvery creatures that they were shooting at. And the excuse of calling all of these people that the chief gave later was he thought that maybe the locals were having like some kind of a gunfight, some kind of a, confrontation between...
Oh, neighbors?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the whole...
Hatfields and McCoys.
There you go, Hatfields and McCoys. Or something, I don't know. Because it really doesn't make
Lakers and Whites.
Anyway, the authorities get there, and I guess local media had picked up the story, so there was a couple of reporters there as well.
Okay.
And they looked everywhere. They went up on the roof. The only thing, one of the officers did say he noticed a glow in the trees, but after they went over there to check it out, they didn't find anything. Like the glow that they had described, the
Right.
Suttons, because this is the Sutton family we're talking about. And then the other thing that happened that they had found was like a stain on the ground where I believe it was Billy Ray claimed to have shot one of the creatures with the 20 gauge. And it was like liquid, and it seemed to glow like an iridescent sheen when looked at from an angle, or like it was just really weird looking, and the police officers noted it. So that's basically, they left after they spent hours investigating, they left, and later on in the night, Glennie, the mother, the matriarch of the family, she wakes up and sees one of these things peeking in the window again at 3:30 in the morning. And they basically stood guard until the following morning, until the sun came up, and these things departed when the sun came up. Oh, that was another thing. They said that they turned on all the lights in the house because it was like the bright lights bothered
them.
Yeah, kind of
bothered the creatures.
Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, sensitivity to light.
Yeah, so that's really weird. But anyway, because when the sun came up, the things vanished. So they basically, that was the last they had seen of them. So that's basically the summary of what had happened.
Okay.
And that's the Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter. So now I want to talk about the red flags. So the first red flag that stuck out to me and really irritated me was the debunkers put forth, and I'm glad we went over the rules for debunkers in the episode before last.
Right.
Because those rules are going to apply to this case insanely.
Yeah.
They cited Kentucky moonshine or other alcohol as being the primary cause of the whole quote-unquote hysteria that they were describing this family had gone through. Well, the funny thing is that all the locals laughed that off because they knew the Sutton family. They knew Glennie,
Yeah,
who
Miss
was
Glennie.
Miss. I think they called her Mama Glennie, didn't they?
Well, I don't know, but I'm gonna call her Miss Glennie.
I think they called her Mama Glennie because, again, she was well known in the community from the church and stuff. But they all knew. Not only did she not allow alcohol on her property, she didn't even allow cursing.
Oh, Miss Glenny didn't want no heathens on her property.
So the idea that alcohol was involved was just it's just a rule by proclamation. Make your conduct
Just like
your.
hillbillies drink moonshine, so we're gonna blame moonshine.
It's an example of the fourth rule in the rules for debunkers.
Go after the people.
No, that's the second one. No, that's the third one. Do your research by proclamation. In other words, you don't do research. You just make these blanket statements, and this is one. It had to be alcohol. When there was no alcohol, the police found no alcohol in the entire property and no evidence that that anybody was drinking. So, again, proclamation, no proof. The other thing that the early news reports that came in about this case, they were so inaccurate, it was insane. For example, and this is probably the biggest one because this case is what coined the term little green men. Even though no one in the family claimed these things were green, they said that they were gray or silver.
Yeah.
But somehow the newspapers said little green men, and that's where the term little green men was coined. So then the other inaccuracy was that most reports claimed that there were 5 adults and 7 children. I have no idea why, because it was 8 adults and 3 children.
Yeah, I saw that a lot.
Yeah. Of the claims that there were more children than adults.
I saw that a lot.
Just for the sake of argument, let's go over who was there. The first and foremost was Glennie Langford, which was the matriarch, that's the mom. Her 3 younger children, Lonnie, Charlton, and Mary. Then her 2 older sons were there, and that's Lucky and JC. Their wives, Vera and Aileen. Aileen's brother was also there. He was also an adult. His name was O.P. Baker. And then friends of Lucky, Billy Ray, and that's the guy that went out and saw the thing in the sky, and his wife, June. So that's 8 adults and 3 children. No mistake. No, controversy. I don't know why they reported it so messed up, saying that, there was so many kids, and maybe because it made it less believable to say that there was more kids.
Maybe.
I don't know. The whole thing was just very strange, and that's why it's a red flag to me, because it stood out. I just don't see how an honest newspaper could make that mistake. And remember, just in the last episode, we were talking about how newspapers could purposefully misconstrue stuff.
Right.
Because remember, at the time, this was in the 1950s. This is when the government launched Project Blue. Actually, I think they launched Project Blue Book. Probably should have looked at it. But this is when they launched Project Blue. Project Blue Book was going on. And Project Blue Book was basically the government's attempt to silence all of the UFO reports. Because remember, there was a big old UFO explosion during the 1940s after Roswell.
Okay.
It was the 1940s, right?
Sure.
I think it was. I think it was 19. Anyway, that launched this whole flap of UFO reports. So the government, in response, put out Project Blue Book to basically silence all of the stories. And that we'll talk about that more in the Arguable Truths. But anyway, another red flag that stuck out to me was the character of the family, of the Sutton family. Again, they were established. The boys had grown up on the farmhouse this occurred at. They were born and raised there. And even the police chief from Hopkinsville, which is like 8 miles down the road or something, I think it is.
Yeah, maybe.
8 or 10 miles, something
Sure.
like that. He knew this family. He knew who this family was because he claimed...
There's only 200 people, so of course you're going to know.
Right, well, that was from Kelly. He lived in
from Kelly.
Hopkinsville.
Oh,
remember?
gotcha.
The chief. Well, I don't know. He might have lived in Kelly and worked in Hopkinsville. I don't know.
You don't know.
It's a possibility. But anyway, he is quoted as saying, these aren't the kind of people who normally run to the police for help. What they do is reach for their guns, which is exactly
What they did.
what they did.
Yes.
Right. But he was shocked when they showed up at the police station, panicked and completely terrified out of their minds.
That's probably why he called everybody in, told everybody to come on up to the Sutton farm. Something's going on, because they're not the type to call out for help. They handle their business.
They handled their own business
on their farm.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people did back then.
Now this is a very weird red flag because, and I don't want to talk about certain things because of the inarguable truths, but they claim to see these things were waist high, was the description. So that's anywhere between 3 and 4 feet tall. I think it's closer to 4 feet for most people, between 3.5 to 4 feet. You know what I mean? For your average person, I would think. Because 3 feet is, I don't know, that's like mid-thigh, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, mid-thigh? Yeah. Maybe a little higher than mid-thigh?
Yeah.
They said they were waist high, so that would be close to like 3.5 to 4 feet. So anyway, they said they were gray or silvery skinned creatures. They had large yellow glowing eyes, well-built upper bodies, with tiny, thin legs, arms that once they were like hanging down, their arms almost reached the ground. So they were very long arms with clawed hands. And I initially thought, and this was probably one of the false media reports that I had read, I had initially thought that they were wearing some kind of silvery suit that emitted a green glow. But that isn't what, from what I've read in the descriptions after that, I didn't see anything about suits. In fact, the drawings just show them as these, they're just naked creatures with
with that skin, like a silver skin.
Like a silvery or gray skin, right. And they didn't have any kind of like genitalia or anything. They were just like these weird, really weird creatures. And that was the other thing one of the media got incorrect, was that they, like I said, they were wearing these silvery suits. And the news reports claimed that there were like 14 or 15 of them assailing this farmhouse. Right. When the family described only 3 to 4 of these creatures. Right. Also, the media claimed that they were only 2 to 3 feet tall, which is that's a big difference. It's over a foot off.
Yeah, that is.
So again, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose. It just seems weird to get that many facts wrong, right?
Yes.
Especially when those reporters there on the scene.
The site, yeah.
I mean, they showed up that night and were talking to the family directly what happened to that night. So how could you mess up so many facts?
Correct.
It just seems to me like maybe it was done on purpose or whatever. But anyway, investigators found on the ground where he had shot, and I went over this in the summary. Yeah. But they found that smear of strange liquid on the ground that gave off that weird glow. And then, again, one of the police officers did say he saw some kind of weird glow in the trees. At the time, well, we'll go over that in the interrogatory. We'll choose them. Okay. Another red flag that stuck out to me, and this one's kind of funny. The debunkers love almost everything you look up. Almost everywhere you look on this case, you'll read about how they say skeptics, but they're debunkers. Skeptics say that this case was considered a hoax by Project Blue Book. But again, we just talked about that. Do you know how many cases Project Blue Book said were legit?
No, because I do not know what Project Blue Book is.
Wow. You don't know what Project Blue Book is? No, seriously.
I was going to ask for a question.
Wow, baby. It was a whole... It's kind of like a military operation, but it was a project launched by the government. I think it was mostly surveillance, though. That's why it's a project and not an operation. And it was these surveillance that the government sent out to investigate all these UFO findings. Oh. But the thing is that once somebody did like a breakdown of the Project Blue Book tendencies or their practices, like 81% of all the cases, we're talking about thousands of cases, baby, because Project Blue Book was like, I think it was decades.
Actually, Project Blue Book was conducted from 1952 to 1969.
It's that they did this quote-unquote study. Yeah. But like 81% of all the cases were explained away by weather balloons. Oh. Well, how many weather balloons do we have?
I didn't even know there were weather balloons in the 50s.
Well, they had to have been, because remember Roswell was a weather balloon, too.
Okay. Well, I guess.
You don't know what Roswell is either?
No, I know what Roswell is. I thought weather balloons were a newer invention.
But I think it's funny that the debunkers use Project Blue Book as, the stamp. They say it's a hoax, and that means it's a hoax.
As the official.
Yeah.
Official hoax.
And it's ridiculous because, again, everything, thousands of cases founded by or investigated by Project Blue Book were found to be misidentified. There were 81% of them were weather balloons, and the rest they found zero truth, I believe. Not one case was listed as unexplained or strange, or all explained away. Just weather balloons, lights in the sky, whatever, you know.
Those damn weather balloons.
Yeah, those weather balloons, man, they'll get you every time. Now, another red flag, and I know I'm probably going to go off on this way too much because that's what I like to do, but I'm going to try not to. It just stuck in my craw, was that the fact that they alerted Fort Campbell U.S. Army base and called out 4 MPs. What does the military have anything to do?
Yeah.
I mean, the excuse was that they thought maybe there was like a Hatfield and McCoy thing going on, right?
Yeah, but then you would just call the state troopers.
The state troopers.
I mean, you wouldn't call the military
and if you
unless
did-
it was like, no, you wouldn't.
You
I don't
wouldn't.
think you wouldn't.
You wouldn't. The military is federal. They have no jurisdiction whatsoever when it comes to local. If anything, if it was like a serious problem, like there was like martial law going on or something, you would contact the National Guard.
Oh yes, you would.
That's who would come in and take care of it, because that is Kentucky. The national, for people that don't know, the National Guard are state. They're state military, because every state in the United States is sovereign. And this is for the benefit of people that might be listening that aren't from America, that don't know how what the terms mean. Our National Guard, that's what they do. Each state has its own military, basically. They're only temporary troops. They're not permanent, but each state is sovereign, has its own military.
Correct.
So if anything happened, like
they would have called it. You're right.
like let's say a whole 200 people in one town and 200 people from another town decided to have this big old duel out in the streets, and they're shooting people dead.
They would call the National Guard.
They would have called the National Guard.
You're correct.
They
I didn't
wouldn't-
even think about the National Guard.
There's no
actually.
reason. There's zero reason that I can think of why you would call the U.S. Army. It
Yeah.
makes no sense, unless. Here we got to put our tinfoil hats on, baby.
Okay.
Oh, here you go with your stupid conspiracies. Oh, you guys. But hear me out. I believe there had to be a standing order from the government to the local PDs. That every time something odd, because remember, they reported silvery little creatures, silvery goblin-like creatures that they were shooting at. I believe there was a standing order from the government to the local PDs. If you hear anything like that about little men or UFOs, or call the military. We want the military involved.
And you could be right, because the base is close. So, like, if the communities and the cities and the towns near a base would probably have different directions given from the government, then you know what I mean? Don't you think?
Yeah, and now that I'm thinking about it, we might be way off base here, because there could be National Guard on Fort Campbell. But I think National Guard usually have their own base. They usually have their own little facilities.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think they would have said that the MPs were from the National Guard. They wouldn't have said the U.S. Army, because Fort Campbell is a U.S. Army base.
Oh, okay.
So
Does the National Guard have MPs also?
I don't think they do, because I think if there's any problem with the National Guard, I don't know. I don't know a lot about the National Guard. When I served, I was a regular Army. I served.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know a lot about the National Guard. I don't know.
Never mind, everybody.
I know that the National Guard trains with the military, and so do the reservists. Because I remember we did training with the National Guard and stuff. So, and because they're the weekend warriors, they go and do that.
Yeah.
But most of their training is done on their own.
Okay.
And I think it's civilian stuff. I think
Okay.
it's handled in state. I don't think they go through. So yeah, I don't think there would be MPs on Fort Campbell that were from the National Guard. They had to be U.S. Army.
Okay.
But anyway, we're going off on that
Yeah,
tangent way too.
we're going to the left. Sorry, y'all.
I told you we would. Because it's a huge red flag.
Yeah, it is.
It makes me very curious, because
And if any of you know the answer, let us know.
yeah, but I do think it's because the government. Because remember, this was Project Blue Book. All that time, the UFO flap. I think it's feasible that the government had standing orders to local PDs and local sheriff's departments and stuff. Anything strange, we want the government there. We want to be there.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now I think we pretty much covered the red flags pretty good.
Yep, red
We're gonna
flags
move
are
on
done.
to the inaugural truths, and guess what, baby?
What?
I have pre-recorded
Uh-oh, everybody.
inarguable truths announcements. That's right. We're moving up in the world.
We're getting a little professional, y'all.
I'm getting better.
Okay.
I'm getting better at editing, I
All right,
think.
well, let's do it.
Inarguable truth number 1.
There were third-party witnesses to the events prior to the attack on the farmhouse.
Inarguable truth number 2.
Owls do not attack houses.
Inarguable truth number 3.
Foxfire does not grow on dirt.
Inarguable truth number 4.
Officers isolated the family to question them separately and got the same consistent description of the creatures.
Inarguable truth number 5.
The family abandoned the property after only 10 days.
Inarguable truth number 6.
The family did not profit from the incident.
Inarguable truth number 7.
No one in the Sutton family, or any of the others that were there that night, ever went back on their word. So let's talk about inarguable truth number 1, which was there were third-party witnesses to the events prior to the attack on the farmhouse. Now, at the time that Billy Ray was going out to get his glass of water and saw the thing flying over his farmhouse, neighbors also claimed that they saw something in the sky. At the time Billy Ray and Lucky reported seeing that thing coming through the trees, that strange glow towards the house, other neighbors claimed that they too saw strange glowing lights in the trees behind the Sutton property. The same neighbor that saw that glow in the trees also heard the gunshots, the gunfire. And they just thought, must be dealing with some kind of a predator going after the livestock, right?
Right.
So there was other witnesses that saw what was reported. You know, it wasn't just the family just making it up out of their hat. Other people saw weird things too.
Correct.
Didn't you say that you... Didn't you... I'm saying you're pausing because I want you to say... Didn't you say that you read somewhere that somebody had seen...
Oh, yeah, they said a
meteor
meteor
shower.
shower.
Yeah.
They said a meteor shower.
Yeah.
There was an officer that said there was a meteor shower that night, and then there was also some neighbors that said that.
Which could go against what they had claimed. That's actually against what Billy Ray had seen in the sky.
Yes.
Because that could explain it away. The skeptics could have latched onto that, if that's true. I mean,
But
because
the skeptics didn't use that.
no. So there must not have been any reports of the meteor. They must have said it later or something.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah. Actually, the skeptics/debunkers did mention a meteor shower.
Just to explain it away or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to inarguable truth number 2.
Owls do not attack houses.
This is a big one. This, and I'm gonna try not to get irritated because this really irritates me.
Okay.
This is a perfect example of doing your investigation by proclamation, which is why we know everybody that looked at this case were debunkers. They claimed that great horned owls were nesting
Near the house.
near the house, and everybody knows in the area, great horned owls get very aggressive when they're nesting, so that's what led to the attack on the farmhouse, and that's what panicked the family.
Yes.
Dumb, idiotic, asinine. It makes no sense, because I could look high and low, baby. I looked everywhere.
Yeah.
For reports that owls attack houses. They don't.
Yeah.
No, and that's why I made the inarguable truth kind of silly. Owls don't attack houses, because it's nonsensical. Again, if you're going to give me a good argument as a quote-unquote skeptic, I'm going to respect that. I'm going to consider it, and I'm going to humbly disagree, and I'll be respectful. But if you're going to give me garbage like owls,
Yeah.
and remember, these people grew up in the country.
Yeah, they're country folk.
Mama Glennie,
Miss Glennie knows what an owl is.
she knows what an owl is. She's lived out in the country her whole life. She was in her 50s.
They said she lived in that house for decades.
Decades. Those boys grew up in that house. So they knew all the local wildlife. The idea that they would mistake these 4-foot-tall, silvery-skinned creatures for owls is absolutely moronic. It is idiotic. And that's why it irritates me. It does, because, and again, let's just say for the sake of argument, baby, because this goes into do your research by proclamation, the 4th rules for debunkers. Let's just say for the sake of argument that they were rabid owls, right?
Yeah.
And they just attacked ceaselessly this farmhouse. Number one, what is an owl going to do to a house?
Not much.
Oh, hoot?
Yeah, not much.
Hoot.
Might fly into the door or something.
You
I
know,
don't
peck at the roof. I mean, what,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
going to be able to do anything to a house. The idea that owls could scare these 8 adults out of a house and send them running it's nonsensical.
Yeah, I just can't see Miss Glennie and her boys
Panicking
being scared. Yeah,
of an
being
owl.
that scared of an owl.
Now, granted, great horned owls are pretty big birds.
Right.
I think the largest one was like 28 inches, which is like almost 2.5 feet tall, which
Okay.
that's a pretty big bird.
That is a big bird.
But that's like Guinness Book of World's Record. The average height of them, I think, is around 24 to 25 inches,
Okay.
which is way below 4 feet.
Yes.
Way below.
Yes.
That's like half the size. That's around 2 feet tall, which is what, knee high?
Yes.
Remember, these things were described as waist high.
Right.
So,
Also, I looked it up in Kentucky, and great horned owls nest in December and lay their eggs in January.
that is such a good point, baby.
And this was in August.
I am so, if I could give you a badge, I would. Again, perfect example. Do your research by proclamation. Owls don't even nest in August. Remember, this happened in August.
Yes.
They don't even nest in August.
Yes.
So this explanation, and all of the morons afterwards, when this,
And nationally, they nest during the wintertime. Now, this is August in Kentucky. They had the windows open, the screen on the doors. It's hot in Kentucky in August. Mm-hmm. So,
I was trying to make the point, all of the other morons, maybe I shouldn't be so rude.
no, don't call them morons.
Well, all of the other debunkers
There you go. Just debunkers.
that agreed with the explanation, and if you're one of them out there, sorry I'm calling you a moron, but you're a moron. Everybody that agrees that it's an owl, when owls don't even nest in August, when the family would have recognized owls, and owls don't hover, okay? If you agreed with that explanation, you're an idiot. I'm sorry, you are, because it's idiotic. Another thing, and this is a huge point, baby. If they're shooting owls, again, let's just say a rabid band of owls was just renegade owls were attacking this farmhouse. Let's just say, for the sake of argument,
Right.
and these men were shooting these things through the screens, through the windows, point blank range.
Yes.
Where's all the feathers?
Blood.
Where's all the blood? Where's the bodies?
Yeah.
When the investigators got there, don't you think they would have taken into account if they just saw a massacre of dead owls laying everywhere,
Yeah.
or just feathers and blood? They found no evidence that anything was there. That means whatever they were shooting at, they didn't hurt. Owls are not bullet. I should have made that an inarguable truth.
Owls are not bulletproof.
They're not bulletproof. You can't shoot an owl without leaving evidence, is the
Yes.
point. Anybody that's ever done any kind of bird fowl hunting knows when you shoot a bird, that's the first thing that they lose feathers everywhere, and feathers stick. Most people would think, well, the feathers could have blown away there, sir, so your point's kind of... No. Anybody that's ever lived on a farm that's had chickens or pigeons or any kind of bird, ducks,
Went turkey hunting.
turkeys, the feathers stick, baby. You would be amazed at what the feathers stick on. Just the smallest little blade of grass and a feather will cling. Those little, fluffy little, they'll
Yes.
stick to it. And you can tell when there's birds in the area, as
Right.
far as poultry
Yeah.
are on the farms because you're going to see those feathers.
Right.
So if there was this massive marauding band of owls attacking this farmhouse, there would have been evidence of it. But again, do your research by proclamation. No evidence needed. You just explain it away as owls, and everybody's like, oh, yeah. Good explanation. Yes. Good. So let's go on to the next inarguable truth, which is foxfire does not grow on dirt.
Okay, before we start this one, may I ask a question?
Of course you can, baby.
What the heck is foxfire?
I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
It is a fungus,
Okay.
and I showed you pictures of it.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Now
just-
I showed
just
you.
right now.
and it's a mushroom, is what it is,
Oh, okay.
and it They don't grow on dirt. Foxfire feeds on decaying wood. The police report doesn't mention decaying wood. The police report doesn't mention mushrooms. The police report mentions a stain on the ground where Billy Ray had shot one of these things.
Okay.
And it gave off an iridescent glow.
Okay.
Also, again, do your research by proclamation. It's foxfire, and that just explains everything away. The glow coming through the trees. Foxfire doesn't fly. It doesn't move through the trees, okay? Plus, it glows like a weird... It's almost like a glow-in-the-dark color. It's
And it's not liquid, right? Like
No.
It can't, like, if you touch it, you can't get it on your hands?
No, it's bioluminescence.
Okay.
It's not like a fluid that they're giving off. It's like the actual structure of the... It's kind of like fireflies,
Oh, okay.
you know?
Yeah.
The bioluminescence.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if you kill a firefly and... No, I think if you get the fluid on you, it doesn't glow. Because they have to like do like an electric... They do like a charge or something, like a static charge to make it glow or something.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how it works, but the point is that everybody that was there, I would argue, everybody that was there, even the police chief, because they're from Hopkinsville, which is, they're still out in the country.
Right.
So they would know what foxfire was.
Yes, they would.
The police officers would know what foxfire was.
Yes.
Who knows where the MPs were from? They might have been country boys or country women. We don't know.
Yeah.
They might have known what foxfire was.
Correct.
And the state police that are from the state of Kentucky, they would know what foxfire was. But most importantly, the Sutton family would know what foxfire was if it grew in the area. They would have seen it all the time.
Yeah.
Again, that's like saying somebody, oh, you just saw a firefly, when these people see them every year.
Yeah.
They know what fireflies are. You're not... How... You see how dismissive and how disrespectful it is?
Yes.
And that's what really irritates, going back on the owl thing, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to go off it. I just can't help it. It just irritates me. That's what's so asinine about the explanation, baby, because to me, I don't for 1 second think that the debunkers putting out that blanket explanation of owls, I don't for 1 second think that they're dumb enough to actually believe that explanation. The reason they're putting out that idiotic explanation is to humiliate, to disrespect, and to basically smear this family, because they're basically calling them stupid. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So that's why it irritates me, and that's why I get so worked up about it, because they're not doing it as a legitimate explanation. They're doing it to attack the family, to attack their intelligence. And don't tell me, because remember, Lucky's first name is actually Elmer.
Yes.
So you had Elmer,
Yep.
JC,
OP.
OP, and Billy Ray.
Yeah.
Don't tell me for 1 second that those names didn't explain.
Those are good Yankee names.
Yeah, and don't tell me for 1 second that those names didn't escape the local media, and those names didn't escape the debunkers.
But when you say local media, if you say local media, local media is going to have those names too. You're
Maybe.
You know.
But what I'm saying is that they use that as an excuse to, because remember, they just viciously attacked this family, baby.
Right.
They got torn to pieces.
Such a shame.
We'll talk about it in the conclusions and
Okay.
in the inarguable truths a little more a bit, but they basically don't want to talk about it anymore. They put it out.
Yeah.
They just put it out of there and moved away from the area.
Yeah.
You know, Glennie moved, she lived in the country her whole life, and she sold the farm and moved to the city into a small apartment, which everybody that knew her...
Inarguable truth number 5.
Oh, sorry, I'm going ahead of myself.
We're jumping ahead.
Okay. But anyway, the point is, foxfire doesn't grow on dirt. If it was fungus, the police would have said it was fungus. They described it as a liquid.
Okay.
So foxfire is not a legitimate explanation for it. And plus, if there was wood laying there, they would have said wood. They said it was on the dirt, on the ground where this guy shot it. So,
Okay.
so inarguable truth number 4, and this is a huge one.
Yes.
Officers isolated the family to question them separately and got the same consistent description of the creatures.
Correct.
Now, you can get your story straight, but how do you get your drawings straight?
Yeah.
Because they actually brought in sketch artists, police
Yes.
sketch artists,
Yes.
that talked to the individual adults and quickly sketched what they described. And back in the day, I remember when I was a young, like 20 years ago, I remember you could see all of the pictures that these sketch artists had drawn and what some of the children had drawn. And it was astounding how nearly identical they were.
Wow.
How do you do that? How do you fake that?
Yeah.
You know, they saw something.
Yeah.
They all drew the same thing. I think that's a huge point.
There's also a point where that they said that when they did the sketches or they asked for a description, they talked to the children and the women earlier in the day, and then later in the day they talked to the men, and this was the day after because the men had gone away from the house to do I don't know if they went to work or do some chores, I don't know, but they were away from the rest of the family earlier in that day when they asked for descriptions. So they asked 2 different times in that day, and they all got the same
Oh, I see what you're saying. So the women and the children were interviewed in the morning,
early part of the day, yeah.
and then the men came home later in the afternoon, and then they separated them and had them describe what they saw.
Yeah.
And then that's when they got those drawings?
Yeah.
So they weren't even together.
No, they weren't even together.
Again, how do you...
Yeah.
You can get a story straight.
Yeah.
But how do you get a drawing straight? How do you get a description straight to that accuracy unless you actually saw something? Because we could say, oh, yeah, we saw this big monkey-like thing looking in the window, but what you draw and what I draw are going to be totally two totally different things.
Well, even when you do a description, like when the police ask you for a description, sometimes your mind plays tricks on you. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, no, he was in a red shirt, and the person was in a blue shirt. You know what I mean? So it's amazing how similar the sketches were.
But when you see something that traumatizes you, when you see something that frightens you, you're not going to forget it.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
I think that's overwhelming evidence that they saw something, and what they saw were not owls.
Yeah.
What they saw were not monkeys, because that was the other explanation. I didn't even make, because that's such it's even worse than owls. Apparently, because Lucky and his friend Billy Ray were carnies.
Right.
They helped set up the carnivals and stuff as workers. That's what they did as work. Apparently, since they were involved with the carnival, these debunkers came out and said, well, they just smuggled some monkeys on the property, and that's what was scaring the family, is these monkeys. Really?
Yeah, that's...
And where did the monkeys go?
Yeah.
Are they trained monkeys?
Yeah.
Did they just sit in a...
They would have had evidence of the monkeys, too, though. They would have had blood. Monkeys are not bulletproof either.
Exactly.
So,
but baby, where would you hide the What did they put them in a trunk?
I don't know.
Hide them in the attic when the police were there?
I don't know.
But again, do your research by proclamation.
Yes.
No evidence required. You can just say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that's the explanation. So that's why I didn't even want to mention it, but that was one of the other explanations, is that these guys smuggled monkeys on the property, which is to prank the family, and then proceeded to shoot these monkeys that belonged to the carnival, apparently. Weren't even theirs. But but that's how nonsensical they're willing to get to try to debunk something. That's the whole point. In Arguable Truth number 4, that they actually separated them apart, and all of them got the same story, and all of them had a completely identical description of what they had seen. Even the children, to me, is astounding. Oh, and I messed up on that point. You could see all of the drawings back in the day. I remember like 20 years ago, there was like 8 or 9 of these drawings, but now I can only find like 1 or 2 of them, because evidence magically disappears. Yeah, evidence just happens to disappear when stuff seems to be leaning towards the unexplained, or it just magically kind of vanishes. And I won't be surprised here in about 10 or 15 years if those last 2 drawings of this incident magically disappear off the internet. I would not be surprised at all. Let's move on to Arguable Truth number 5. The family abandoned the property after only 10 days. The only reason I think this is an inarguable truth is because it goes against the character of the family. We were talking about it before. And
yes. It's sad because Miss Glennie spent decades on that property in her family. She raised her family on that property, and that's just so sad. You know, that something scared you so bad.
Yep.
And I've said this in the past. I said this in a previous episode. Your home is your safe place. It's your
sanctuary.
It's your sanctuary.
Yep.
And to just how sad that property and Miss Glennie had to go get an apartment when she had this beautiful farmhouse on a farm. And I mean, I don't know if it was beautiful, but I mean, she had her own farm, and her kids could just run on the property and have a good old time. And now they went to the city with a apartment,
where their whole life is going to change.
Yes,
because they're going
life
from
is drastically going to change.
They went from living out in the country to living in the city. That's a huge move, and everybody that knew Glennie knew that was against her character. So they knew something traumatic had to happen. Yeah. And I think this is why it's such an important and arguable truth. Also, there were so many reporters and looky-loos, these UFO enthusiasts just descended upon this farmhouse by the hundreds.
Yeah, they were saying they were having picnics on the property. They were just having a good old time like it was Disneyland. And then they were walking into the house without permission.
Yep.
I'm telling you right now.
It was what's it called? An attraction.
Yeah, like their house was an attraction. I'm telling you right now, these people that they're giving the description of, if you walk right into their house, I know some Kentucky people, you just walk right into the house and you're just a stranger, you're not going to get a warm welcome. You're just not going to get a warm welcome.
Mm-hmm. They're lucky they didn't get shot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was surprised.
Yeah. Now they do a yearly festival called the Little Green Men Festival or something in that area because they embraced what happened on this farm.
Yeah.
So I guess that she's the chairperson, this Joanne Smythe, she's the one that was describing what had happened, that these people were just walking onto the property and just picking stuff up and taking it as souvenirs. Just picking stuff up out of the yard and taking it.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Walking into the house, walking into the garage,
just grab your stuff.
Can you imagine? You look out your back window and there's like 10 people in your backyard?
Yeah, just grabbing your stuff.
Yeah, just grabbing your stuff and walking off with it because it's a souvenir now. All of a sudden, that's insane. Plus, they were being ridiculed and called liars.
Right.
Remember, they were called drunks?
Yes. Oh, I bet Miss Glennie did not like that.
Oh, yeah. They were being called drunks.
Because if Miss Glennie was in her church and everything and her boys are called drunks and she's called a drunk, Miss Glennie probably didn't like that.
So they got so tired of being harassed and called liars, they basically abandoned the property after only 10 days.
That's so sad.
So let's move on to arguable truth number 6.
Yes. Oh, sorry. The family did not profit from the incident. Sorry. I was thinking about Miss Glennie, y'all. I'm sorry.
I'll give like hand signals. I'm going to have to go so that you see it's your turn.
Okay, on a serious part, the family did not profit from the incident.
Yes, they did not profit from the incident because there was reports by the debunkers that the family was charging people to go onto the property. This was proven time and time again by the locals that were actually there, time and time again by the police officers that were actually there, and time again by the family that actually lived on the farm. They did not charge people to come onto the property. That was an absolute lie, again, made up by the local media and by the debunkers. Right. Because they were trying to say that, see, they're just trying to make a buck. They're just trying to capitalize on it, so they're lying. No, it was a lie. They did not charge people to get on the property. They think, and again, I think this was the chairperson, this Joanne Smythe that made this point. She said there was an old country saying back there, hey, if you're going to hang around, I'm going to have to start charging you.
Oh, yes.
So that maybe one of them had said that to these people that were, trespassing on their property. Hey, if y'all don't get out of here, I'm going to have to start charging you. And that's how the whole rumor got out that, this family's over there making a quick buck off these enthusiasts and stuff. It was nonsense.
Yeah.
There's zero evidence that they charged anybody to get on the property. So they had no monetary motivation whatsoever to do this. In fact, we looked it up later, and they just vanished. They stopped talking. They basically vanished.
Yeah,
and got out of the limelight.
Which goes into number 7.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that more and we can move on to it right now.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in argument truth number 7, no one in the
Sutton family or any of the others that were there that night ever went back on their word.
Thank you for being able to read what I...
You're welcome.
Okay. This is a big one.
This is.
Because, again, the family vanished.
Yeah.
They were so frightened to come out and talk about it that they basically just stopped talking about it.
Right.
We during our research, and I was reading it to you, so you heard it too.
Yes.
We found out from the youngest daughter, Lucky's youngest daughter. She claims that 14 years after the incident, 2 people came to the door and wanted to speak to her father. Her father came out and started talking to these people. Well, of course the kids were curious.
Yeah.
She's 8 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Daddy, what are you talking to these
They're
people
probably
about?
the people in the black suits.
No, baby, there were researchers trying to write a book about what happened. Well, I read it to you.
I know.
Oh, you're making a joke.
Yeah, I'm making
I'm
a
sorry.
I'm kind of trying to be funny.
I'm all being serious. Well, no, you get it wrong. No, but so basically, the kids are asking, "Hey, Daddy, what are you talking to these people about?" And the father, for the first time in 14 years,
Yeah.
told his children for the first time about what had happened on the farm. So he didn't even tell his kids what happened.
Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah.
That's how secretive
And that's
they were.
Miss Glennie's grandchildren that didn't know.
That they didn't know.
That means that Miss Glennie didn't talk about it.
She didn't talk about it either. Nope.
And the other children.
Nobody talked about it.
JC,
They clammed up
Yeah.
because they were being so viciously ridiculed and being called liars and drunks and everything else.
Oh.
And smuggling monkeys. Come on. But anyway, she described all of the people that were involved. They were too afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
Even 15, 16, 17 years down the road, none of they clammed up. That was the first time she had heard what happened. In fact, she described right after this visit of these 2 researchers that wanted to write a book on what had happened to him and his family, Lucky took his kids, packed them up, and they went to visit the property for the first time in over a decade.
Wow.
And he showed them what had happened. Of course, the property was run down. You know, the farmhouse had been abandoned and stuff. But she remembers distinctly as a little girl, being eight years old, her dad, guiding her around the property, showing her where they had seen everything. So that's fascinating, huh? And that was the
Yeah.
first time he talked about it.
That's sad that that they never kept the property and then share it with the rest, like the next generation. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Until that incident happened.
Yeah, they got chased off.
Yeah.
They abandoned it. It's
Yeah.
Which, again, that's kind of like in the Amityville Horror, where they just
Yes.
abandoned it.
Yeah, they just
You
got
know,
up and left.
Your whole life, you sink everything you have into this
Yeah.
property. Your whole life is around this
Yeah.
house and this property, and you just abandoned it.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, they're just doing that to get out of the money, just paying it. It's not. You don't abandon what especially Glennie, when her boys were raised on that property.
Yeah.
You know, her older sons, and she was currently raising her younger kids, their
On that
half siblings,
property.
on the
Yeah.
same property.
Yeah.
And she just up and left.
Yeah.
And if she was destitute, or maybe, I don't want to say poor, but if she wasn't rich, living out in that farmhouse with no running water, how did she afford this small little apartment with 3 kids?
Yeah.
It was probably a financial burden to her.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Had
So-
to be.
And that's another point.
And with saying about the property, and I know we're going way into the property, but if most likely her children were born on that property, because this is 1955, and this is Kentucky in the sticks. So these children probably were born on that property,
Born in the farmhouse.
and only known that home, and that's sad, you know. That's so many memories, you know.
Yeah, because these are country folk. They probably didn't go. They probably didn't have a hospital
No,
to go to.
no. They
So
probably
they probably had a midwife.
yeah, probably had a midwife come out.
And they were probably born right there in that house.
Yep, on the kitchen table.
Isn't that what your dad said? That
Yep, Daddy was born on the kitchen table.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he was born like in the 40s.
yeah, in the
These
40s.
These boys,
These boys were born in the 20s.
the 2 brothers, JC and Lucky, they would have been born in like the late 20s, well, more like the 30s, because I think they were in the early 20s when this happened in 55.
Yeah,
So they would have been born like in the early 30s,
right.
maybe mid 30s, depending on how old they were.
Shoot, we don't even know. Miss Glennie might have been born on the property.
Yeah, who
And
knows?
she was born in the 1905, 1906, approximately. So
Yeah, you kind of looked her up a little bit. Huh? I think that about covers it.
yes, it does.
So,
In conclusion,
in conclusion, baby, what do you think happened?
something bad happened. And I always say this at the end, but it's either something evil or something bad, but it scared that poor family, and Miss Glennie had to pick up and leave that property, and that property probably meant so much to her family. So I know it wasn't owls. I know
Or monkeys?
no monkeys. These are good country folk that take care of business, and something petrified them to where they lost their property, lost their reputation. And they went to the police, and for all we know, it startled the police chief for this family to come to the police.
It did.
And that's probably why he called everybody and their brothers in to save the world. But yeah, something strange happened that scared this poor family. And that's all I have to say.
Every time there you gotta go. You gotta be talking about demons and devils. You Christians. Well, who knows what they were?
Yeah, aliens,
I don't know.
demons, I don't know.
Me, I'm basically right
They
with
just
you.
weren't owls.
I can't, I can't even begin to understand how you can embrace such a moronic explanation as to owls or monkeys. That is so asinine to me. It really is. But I think because of the drawings, because of the character of these people, because remember, they were established in the community
Yes.
through the church. They were
Yes.
well respected. She said they were very quiet,
Yes.
very well respected family. It was not in their nature to lie. It was not in their nature to try to get attention or try to get. So when you take a look at the evidence of the drawings, of the descriptions of what happened in the night, of even the children drawing these things that they saw in the window, because we forgot to say that one of them was actually perched in a tree and everyone in the house could see it out the window.
Yeah.
And they saw it when the men ran out and shot at it. It floated out of the tree and went behind. So they had a clear view of these things, and that's how they were able to draw them.
Right.
I just don't see why they would lie. I think they saw what they saw. And I think that there was probably already knowledge of something going on because the army base was notified.
Yeah.
And they sent MPs out there.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me they don't have radar? The military didn't have radar and maybe even a report, hey, we just saw something weird, flying in the sky on our radar and stuff,
Yeah.
or, because it's just awful funny to me, baby, that all of a sudden here come these MPs out of nowhere. It's awful funny to me. I don't know. Maybe I got to put on a tinfoil hat or whatever.
And that's probably got to be scary too, that the MPs showed up, that the
Yeah.
military showed up to this family,
They have zero jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Zero jurisdiction.
Strange.
Off that base. MPs don't have anything, any kind of, unless they're retrieving a troop, that's AWOL or something,
Yeah.
or a deserter or something. Their jurisdiction ends on that base.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows?
So there was no reason to have MPs there. It's just very odd. But anyway, I believe the family. I believe that they saw something. I don't know what it was or what they were, these creatures. I don't know if they were aliens. I don't know if they were goblins. Maybe they came out of the ground. There's a lot of tunnels and cave systems in that area.
Oh, yes, there is.
So I don't know what they were, but I do believe that they saw what they described, because there was just no other explanation to how you could have identical descriptions of the same thing from 11 different people. I just don't see how that's possible. The chances of that are astronomical, of being a coincidence.
Yeah.
Astronomical. So I think that about wraps it up. What do you think?
It sure does.
All right, well, thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support. Remember, we have the email. Go ahead and email us. We want to hear from you. And if you can like us. If you can review us, give us a good review. And talk about the show word of mouth. If you want to post it on social media, whatever you got to do, get it out there. We want more listeners. We want this show to be successful. And we appreciate all the support you've been giving us.
Thank you all for listening. Good night.